My name is Mike Hoover here in Stockton, California, and I wanted to do a brief film about encaustic painting. It's become quite a bit more popular in the last 35 years, and that's when I started 35 years ago. It's got a reputation for being formidably expensive, and I'd like to show you how I have it set up, the techniques that I use, and the materials and methods that I use that I think are affordable. Well, probably the most expensive thing you're going to run into in doing encaustic painting is the paint. And here's an example of some good professional quality paint by R&F Encaustics. They're in the state of New York. This one is cadmium orange, and it's an example of the most expensive of their paints. It's a little over $30, and this weighs about a little over 3 ounces. You can get a smaller amount of paint. This is one that they also sell that's about 1 ounce, a little over 1 ounce. And they come in just all these different colors. This, for example, is turkey umber greenish. I've never heard of this paint before. This is an example of a little cheaper color. That's one of the earth colors, Mars Yellow Deep. Oh, they have colors that I've never heard of. This one is, for example, brown pink. And they also have iridescent colors. This is copper. So that's the most expensive outlay, I think, and it's probably the most expensive outlay no matter what kind of painting you do, is the paint itself. Well, paint, now you need to, I should say, the paint is beeswax with about 5 to 10% Damar resin. And Damar resin is a tree sap that makes the wax harder, and it raises the melting temperature just a little. We want a way to melt the paint, and so this is the melting palette that I use. And I bought this like 35 years ago when I first got started, and it's a Walmart breakfast griddle. Cost $10, and they still cost $10. You can buy pallets, melting pallets, that are over $300, and I don't know what the difference is. I really don't. But here is a safety issue that you have. This is important. You want to make sure that the paint doesn't get so hot that it smokes. You want to get it to around 170 degrees Fahrenheit to have it work. Don't get it hotter than that. Don't get it so it smokes. You don't want to breathe cadmium fumes. All right, so that's the heating griddle. Next, you'll want to get something to put the paint in, paint cups. And so here is an example of a paint cup that I made. You can buy these for $5 to $10, or you can make your own. And that's what I did. I made my own out of a muffin tin and 10 snips. And it wasn't easy, but you can do it. You may need to use a hammer to help you cut the muffin tin. But the advantage of doing that is you can make them so that they have handles. Can you use tuna fish cans? Yes, you can. The bottoms are uneven, and they may not melt the paint evenly, and they don't have handles. But if you want to use a homemade tuna can thing, here is a handle that you can use for it. So I'm going to melt the paint here, some white. This is just medium. Incidentally, the way to cut the price of the paint is to always mix in medium with it. Here's an example of the medium from R&F. It's just beeswax and Damara resin. This is what it looks like. And if you use about as much medium as you do paint, then it'll extend the paint, and it won't really change the color. So we're going to set this stuff aside and let it melt for a while before we go on to the next step of painting. When we do get to painting, what we'll have is melted paint. Put it on the support. So we'll use brushes. And you can get brushes. You want to use natural bristle brushes so they won't melt. Synthetic brushes melt. Well, this is a chip brush. These are called chip brushes. You can buy this box of 36 chip brushes. Cost $10 for the whole thing. The drawback from these cheap brushes is that they will tend to shed, and you'll want to flock them really good before you do. And even then, some of the bristles will probably come off. I'm not sure how to deal with that in the demonstration. You also want to use other ways of getting the paint out. You can use palette knives. Neatest of all, though, I think, is using the electric brush. This is an example of an electric brush, and it looks like a wood burning kit or a soldering iron, but it's specially designed to be just the right temperature so that it will melt the wax and you can paint it on. This particular electric brush, they don't make anymore. The company that made them, called Encaustics, now has an electric brush that they call a stylus, and it's expensive. It costs about $70. You're going to be glad you have one, though. They're just fun to do with. Plus the idea of having an electric brush. When I first heard of an electric broom, I thought it was a stick with a thing at the end that went like this. Electric broom. You might think an electric brush is the same thing. You push a button and the bottom goes like that. But anyway, you can tell people you have an electric brush. Okay, I'm just going to demonstrate with a simple seascape. And I'm going to start by masking off the horizon. Now, I'm just using ordinary masking tape. In my experience, ordinary masking tape has just a little bit too much adhesive when you apply it over the wax itself. So you take the adhesive off by goofing around with it with your fingers. This is working out good. Yeah, this is working out good. You can just stick it down in something. That kind of a thing with it. I wanted to say that the support that we're painting on is just ordinary masonite, which in the hardware store is called hardboard. And the old masters painted on panel. This is improved wood, it doesn't split. That's my horizon. I'm also going to put in a little C-stack to show you some other techniques. So I'm going to mask out the area for the C-stack. Alright, I wanted to say something about priming the support. You can paint directly onto the wood, onto the masonite, or you can use acrylic, and I've just painted with this with acrylic. Here's the melted paint. Got white, a little extra color in there for you. And I've got the medium. I'm going to cut the white paint with medium. too extended. Now I've melted some color here for the sky. That's sort of a sky color. And I've found a brush that has, that I've used before, that has sort of the color that I want. So I'm going to start by painting the sky. Well, that's too green. Okay, I'm going to start by melting out some of this blue paint. And I'm going to use a wood chisel and a hammer to whack off an amount. I'm going to try to hold it so it doesn't blast all over the place. Alright, so there's a piece, and that's going to be all I want. Put that in a melting cup. Put the melting cup in the hot plate. And set it to go. Now, I wanted to mention another cost saver. It's going to happen that you're going to end up with probably more paint than you needed. And so what do you do with leftover paint? Well, you invest in these expensive paper cups, and you just pour the paint into the paper cup and let it dry, and then put it someplace where you've got a collection of paint. I've got a collection of blues, colors that I have no idea what they are, and so on. There's just an important tip about keeping things clean. If you just leave them sitting out like I do, they're going to collect dust. So when you want to melt them, make sure that you clean the dust off. Otherwise, that's going to end up in your paint on the surface. What's this doing? It's coming right along here. And I'm going to add some medium that's already melted. I'll speed it up a little. I usually use about as much medium as I have paint. Now I'm going to use a fresh brush for this. So stir this around a little. Okay, we're getting there. It's still melting. Okay, so here I've masked out the area that I'm going to paint as sky. And the blue that I've melted is ready to go. It's a little too blue for the sky, so I'm going to add white directly to it. I've got a new brush that I stirred a little bit with, so I'll stir that. Alright, that looks pretty good. So I'm going to paint right onto the surface here. Put this on kind of as thickly as you want. Now, the sky gets cooler as it gets whiter, that's what I meant, as it gets toward the horizon. So I'm going to make a whiter blue. Do it again. See that I'm going to have paint left over. That's where I use paper cups. Just as an aside, you can see paint gets onto the palette, and you can actually paint right off the palette. You can melt paint onto the palette, put a piece of paper on it, burnish it, and take it off, and voila, it's a painting. But that's not the way I do things. All right, we're going to use the hot air gun. Did I mention the hot air gun? I don't know how the Greeks did this stuff without electricity, but they did. And I don't know how Jasper Johns did it. I think he might have used a Black & Decker hot air gun. And I used a Black & Decker hot air, a paint stripper, as my melting device. But this is just a craft hot air gun. Melt the paint. The air from the hot air gun blows the paint around a little bit and creates what I call controlled accidents. I don't really know how it's going to turn out. But it is. Oops, I got a little bit of odd color in there. So, here's what I'm going to do about the little bit of odd color. I'm going to use a fresh brush and just white paint. Just going to put some white paint here. I'm going to put a cloud in here. Of course, I could use a little gray in that too, but I'm not. All right, that got rid of the problem. Also, it didn't turn as white as I thought it would be at the bottom, so I'm going to add some whiter paint here. Alright. Now, see that little cloud that I did? I'm not going to melt that. I'm just going to leave that the way it is. Okay. Now we're going to let that dry before we take the masking tape off. It's just a little easier to do it that way. Okay, that's what it looked like when I took the masking tape off. So now I'm going to mask the other parts and put in the C-stack. And that means I'm going to have to mask over the paint that I've already done. I want to show you before I do that. See this little bit down here where you'll get that, and the way to correct things like that is with an X-Acto knife. You can just scrape off the paint that you don't want. Scrape off the paint that you don't want. Also, for other little mistakes, there. I don't want it. And I can take that out with, I'm clever, with just the tip of the, I'm just going to take the move that out. I mentioned that you'll get bits of brush sometimes stuck in here. And you can take, I don't have any this time to show you, but you can just take them out with an X-Acto knife and remelt the little line. Oh, that was over there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and mask the, in this enough. Mask out the part that I painted now. All right, I'm going to paint the little C-stack here using the electric brush. And I've painted with some other color before, so I'm going to show you how to clean it. You clean it with paraffin. You can get paraffin where they sell canning equipment. Canning goods at the supermarket. Paraffin isn't really the right kind of wax to use, except for cleaning. It's amazing how this works. Anyway, just put it in there. Cleans it off pretty good. Well, that's not a bad color. So I'm going to start with turkey umber greenish just because I think it's a bizarre color. And I'm just going to melt it right out of the, you can see it's a little green. It's turkey umber green. All right. This is a color, I don't know what it is, but it looks, it might be black. A really dark color. Let's see what color it is. It's a dark brown. Alright. I'm going to mix that right on the brush with some white. Stack? Not really. Not yet. Fix it here. Let's see what that's not a very good color either. We'll get there though. You can see that it's possible to get abstract effects pretty easily with caustic paint. They asked Andy Warhol once, Andy, did you ever paint abstract expressionism? He said, no, I don't know why not though. It seems pretty easy. Actually, it's just as hard to do a good abstract as it is to anything else. Alright, I think I just wanted to show you how you use the brush to get the effects that you might want. If you want to, at some other time, do lines, you can do lines. So I'm not going to paint my C-stack any further here. Just wanted to demonstrate how the electric brush can work. I am going to paint some C. What I want to do, I'll just do it here. Now let's do that with thicker paint and get the texture of waves. Wave texture. oceanic, maybe. So what I've been trying to show you is an inexpensive way to go about painting with wax paint encaustic. There's what the line might look like. C-stack demonstration. All right, I'll show you some other paintings now.
Recording.
All right, I wanted to, before I go on, to show you some more serious work that I've done. how you can paint directly off the palette here. I'm going to just mix up some paint. Let me choose a palette knife. This one I like. Okay. Just get some paint on. And you can paint directly with the palette knife. And just warm it up a little. So, that's just another little technique I wanted to show you. How to just paint with a palette knife. Believe me, with practicing, you're going to get good at this. Right? I wanted to show you some examples using the techniques that I just described. This painting, called Spruce Tree House, is of an ancestral Pueblo site that what they used to call the Anasazi Ruins. Now they don't call them that anymore. So this part's done with the electric brush, and this is with the chip brush. Here's the spruce tree of the Spruce Tree House with the electric brush. And this is done with the sky technique I showed you. Now, in reality, the cliff goes way the heck up, so, but for reasons I can't explain, I wanted it to fade out into infinity. So that's the kind of stuff I painted there. Now for this painting, it's kind of a similar feeling. This is from what's called Leadfield in Death Valley. You can find this site down in Titus Canyon. And if you ever get to Death Valley, be sure to go through Titus Canyon. You'll find this structure that someone built down there. It's about the size of it's half the size of a garage. I guess that's where he lived. I got this part to fade with my fingers while the paint is still a little wet. And then this painting uses the same kind of sky technique, but I did it in reverse. And this was a site I found in the Lost Coast, the north end of the Lost Coast here in California. So that's all done. You know how this was done, and this is done with the electric brush. Well, here's another painting. This one won a prize at a jury exhibition. And that's hard to do because they don't have categories for encaustic paintings for the most part. I had to claim it was mixed media. Yeah, it was a mixture of beeswax and damar resin. Well, you see how the sky that I've shown you before. Incidentally, you can burnish this with your fingers, clean hand, make it look like enamel. This is a brass bar. This is called One of the Apples. And there's the apple. And this technique is just flicking up with the electric brush. This last piece I'm showing you, called Time and the Rock. And you can see again the sky, different skies that I have. These are supposed to indicate time, and there's the rock. And that's all done with the electric brush. I wanted to make a comment about terminology. Well, that's about it. But I wanted to make this note on terminology. Encaustic is a Greek word, or it's from the Greek, meaning burning in, as I understand it. And it used to mean, in the world of art, that anything using heat was considered encaustic. Then the term has changed to mean, it seems to mean, or refer to anything that's done with melted wax. But I think encaustic refers to a particular technique. And if you look it up, I think it'll say fused layers. Fusing layers of wax is a technique rather than a medium. And I think these paintings should be called wax paintings in the way that you call medium oil paintings. Or water media paintings, watercolors should be called wax paintings. But this is a losing battle. I don't think this is going to work. Well, I hope you've enjoyed my demonstration here. If you have any questions, you can get in touch with me through the Goodwin Gallery in Stockton, California. Thank you.